and welcome to LaunchLeft Podcast. I'm Rain Phoenix. It's a space for fame creatives to launch the next wave of music rebels and an intentional space to highlight and empower all artists for whom radical creativity is not a choice but a necessity. Today's guest is Ondara, previously under the moniker J.S. Ondara. He made a record in the span of 1 week in quarantine entitled Folk and Roll Volume 1, Tales of Isolation. He composed and produced this record, and we really love the track we're going to play for you today. But first, we're going to speak to him a little bit. Don't forget to rate and subscribe. Follow us on all socials at LaunchLeft.
Hello?
Hi, can you hear me now?
Oh, there you are.
Okay, great.
I don't know how to use technology.
You did great. Hi, Ondara. Is that how you say your name?
It is, yeah.
Am I speaking to you from Minneapolis right now?
Is it? Yeah, yes, you are. Minneapolis, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And you made this beautiful record while in quarantine.
Yeah. I think I just needed to write something as some kind of therapy, I wasn't trying to make a record per se. I was just sort of stuck in something of a rut for a while, and I woke up one morning and just spent 3 days writing these songs and spent 3 more days recording them, and I shared it with my team and they decided it was a record. It wasn't really meant to be one. It was just some kind of therapy for me.
I love any kind of music that happens like that, where it just naturally occurs in a very short amount of time and you put it out and aren't precious about it. That's a difficult thing as an artist to do. So my not existent hat right now off to you for doing that. You're really cool. It's beautiful. Would you call yourself a folk artist? Is that right? Or
sure, yeah.
It reminds me a lot of like the folk artists back in the 60s and 70s, It kind of takes me back to the time before I was born.
Right.
It's cool.
Yeah,
it's cool. Yeah.
Because that's sort of the era of music I'm drawn to, I think. I was just perhaps born in the wrong time.
Yeah, speaking of born, you were born in, is it Nairobi, Kenya? Is that right?
Yeah.
And you lived there for a long time. You grew up there. And then moved to Minneapolis. How was that for you? How was that transition? And when you did move, did it feel what you thought of America before you moved versus what it was? Were two very different countries?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's definitely a contrast between what the idea of America is and what the reality of it is. And when you're a foreigner and you fancy going to America because of films or whatever you hear about it, and that was me. I fancied coming to America for a long time to pursue the American dream. To try and make a career out of playing folk songs. But that idea came head to head with the reality of what America is, which, it's a troubled country, as many others around the world. And so that sort of, that contrast was the premise really for my first record, Tales of America.
Mm. You can tell that your creative is linked very much to the things that you think about and contemplate in your life that are troubling, whether they're big picture things or personal, stories for you, which I think all best art does draw from that, from where we don't understand or what we're trying to uncover. What made you choose, or did you choose Minneapolis? Was it a choice, or was it just like that's where your family was moving?
Well, I moved by myself, so it was definitely a choice. Okay. America it's a big place. I had relatives scattered around, but I chose Minnesota quite randomly, just because I was listening to a lot of Bob Dylan. And I learned that, Bob Dylan was from Minnesota. And I thought, well, I'll just go there. We'll see how it goes. It was
Yeah.
just a random romantic decision that I made at the time.
I assume the weather was a little shocking.
Indeed. Indeed. I mean, I think a lot of people ask me what, if there was any culture shock moving to America. And I think the thing that shocked me the most was just the drastic cold. It was just, I'd never experienced anything like that before. And there's no way to, there's no way you can tell someone about that in a way that's accurate. If they haven't experienced it before. So, they told me, well, it's cold in Minnesota. I was like, well, that's fine. I know cold. But once I landed, I remember I walked out of the airport and I walked right back in. just right back. I had this feeling as though I was being burned by some kind of invisible flame,
Wow.
Yeah, it was a strange experience. That's another record by itself, I think.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
And I assume you were planning to tour and all of that, and that's all been on hold for everyone till 2021. But is that something that you like to do, is perform live and take your music out to the people?
Absolutely. I love telling stories in form of folk songs, and I love doing that around the world. And it's why I moved to America, to find a path towards doing something of that kind. So it's definitely it's been quite an easy time, just having to sit still and not travel. But I think I honestly cannot wait until we can tour again. But for now, I think it's best to stay safe.
Absolutely, no, yeah. Absolutely. Would you say that you've made friends quickly and enjoyed the community where you're at, or are you kind of a loner artist?
Yeah. I mean, I'm certainly a loner in many ways. I spend most of the time by myself. I create better when I'm, by myself somewhere in a hole, just locked in. And perhaps that's why I wrote all the songs so fast. But I mean, at a certain point, you do need a community. You can only do so much by yourself. So when I moved to Minnesota, I didn't really know anyone. So I suppose that was a good opportunity for me to spend time working on my craft. And once I learned how to play the guitar, and found out that where some few open mic places were, that's when I started going out and playing the songs and trying them out. And after that, I started getting support from the community. So I think a bit of both. I'm certainly a loner, but I do appreciate the community that Minneapolis has given me and helped in starting my career.
And if I can ask you how music found you, I always like to ask that question. How did it find you? What's your earliest memory of music?
It's a good question. I think it found me in several intervals. My very first introduction to music, I think in the early 2000s, when CDs became prominent, pirating CDs became a thing very quickly as well, at least back home in Kenya. And so there was all these people in the streets who would be just setting up little stalls and selling pirated music. What they would do basically is they would go to the internet and then they would just download random songs. They didn't know those songs. They didn't need to know them. they were just looking for something interesting to sell to people for income. And so they would download these songs, put them in a CD, and then set up a stall somewhere in the market or by the streets. And then, they would play the music loudly to sort of advertise it. And sometimes they would call you, and if you go to them, they would play you a random song that they downloaded it. And if you liked it, you got to buy the CD. So I remember being very young, perhaps about 8 or 9, and walking around the market and going to this music stall, and this vendor plays for me this song. It's called "Forget Her" by Jeff Buckley, and I remember having this sort of feeling of being like, wow, what's that? What is he doing with his voice? And I spent a lot of time in my room, locking myself, trying to sing like Jeff. And I think that's perhaps where my interest in singing began. I was fond of words before then, but I wasn't really fond of singing until then. So that's probably one instance that I remember finding music, this music finding me in a sort of bizarre way. And I found other bands that way too that I liked, like Radiohead and Death Cab. And later on in high school, a couple years later, I also accidentally found the music of Bob Dylan, which sort of inspired me to try to find ways to put my stories into melodies and try to make a career out of it. So I think it's collectively been a couple of instances of just accidents. It's like a conspiracy of the universe happening in some kind of way to lead me here to making folk songs in Minneapolis and in doing what I do now and in talking to you.
I love that conspiracy of the universe. There's one other question that I always like to ask is, what form of activism does your music or art take, or does it not necessarily show up there, but what is it that you truly do champion and think a lot about and care about?
I think the nature of my music, I think the fundamental nature of folk music in general is activism, really, because it's a process of reflecting on the times in the form of stories, and it's a way of documenting the times so that we are aware of the foolish things we've done, so we can't do them again in the future. Hopefully, history repeats itself sometimes, but I think in that sense, my form of activism is perhaps is just storytelling, because I think storytelling helps us reflect on ourselves, helps us in a way. I think of it as a conduit to compassion, in a way to empathize with other people's experiences, to learn from each other, and that's one of the reasons I was very taken by Dylan's music, is because I found that he had attached those fundamental elements of storytelling to music in such a profound way, and so I suppose in short, I'd probably say storytelling.
Wow, I love that answer. That's so cool. And it's probably one of the more ancient ways that we as humans have been able to not only communicate, but then express, carry on or create tradition and express those things that we are thinking about or hurting over or excited for is, storytelling.
Right. It's the oldest technology.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I love that answer. Wow. Well, Thank you so much for coming on and sharing a little bit about the record. Is there anything you want to share about the record specifically that we haven't touched upon or feel like talking about?
I think you were pretty thorough with your questions. I suppose in summary, I'd just say the songs, they are all about isolation in a way. All of them are connected to something to do with life in isolation, whether it's personal or it's political or it's romantic or whatever. But I think that isolation is almost a disguise for something bigger, because I think this period of isolation has revealed a lot about us as people, about the political structures that we live under, and so as much as it is a record about isolation, I think it's a record about the ramifications of that period of isolation, however short or long it's going to be, in our personal systems and in our societal systems, and how those ramifications will shape our lives for the rest of our lives, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again for being on LaunchLeft, and we will keep an eye out for your upcoming work, but we really love your record and excited to share this song with our community. So have a wonderful day. And
thanks for the chat.
We'll check in again soon, I hope.
Yeah,
okay.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, bye.
Bye.
1959, Nana was getting on to grade 9. She met a boy, went by the name Dean. He was the captain of the football team. She was a fountain of the village scene. He won around much, never really been seen, lest he was visiting Rick's widow, Caroline. Now Dean had him some big head for dreaming, had chicken and swans, supposed to be for selling, had devious plans, getting into gasoline, had several cats in the Hollywood magazine. Oh, they wrote about jazz, oh, they wrote about films, oh, they wrote about cars, oh, they wrote about fiends, oh, they wrote about girls, oh, they wrote about creams, oh, they wrote about the Fed, and they wrote about the thin. Hey, oh, this talking about dreams made Dean's daddy feel sick. He was praying he would avenge his dead brother Rick. The pain made him numb, the war in Vietnam. It took his first son, it took his third son, but I suppose he was a man will never learn, for the pride will return with a fixating bun. If it took his fifth son, if it took his eighth son, it must be just part of the good Lord's plan. Oh, there was a rock down by the river's end. It's where all the evenings them two would spend. They went to God espoused They were young and aroused in a suburban house. They lived out their vows. Oh, she was the teacher and he the freshman. She read the scripture and he the Quran. He was the guitar and she was the drum. The bath was still, but it was gonna be a son. Hey, oh, the dean got sent out to this stupid war. Nana stayed back to look after the store. The war was lost and the troops came back, but Dean wasn't seen with the rest of the pack. Nobody wins in war. 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 Even when they come back, they never really come back. Hey, oh. So the general came with a dreaded knock. Sorry, ma'am, he said, we don't have your block. Oh, Nana never cried, it wasn't her style. Even when she smiled, she was hurting inside. Oh, the general got himself a slope right on his face. The general got himself a name-calling offense. The general got himself a punch right on his chest. The general got himself a red chin and a nice kick between his legs. Many stars danced. She blew off the chance for any romance. Running from the rift, running from the ghost, she took up a shift at the office post. Then one evening, sitting by the counter, a man walked in, his name was Alexander. Had a rose and an elegant pose, scar on his nose, said he was exposed to life's spinning and tossing. Verbose was his suit, he kept talking. Would you like a drink at the cafe? None was closed in, wasn't having it. She said, go whence you're from, for I don't need no love. 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 And I've got no love. I've got no love to give. Oh, 3 days later, guess now who it was. Alexander came back with another rose. Just one little coffee, he politely said, well, I have no need for an interim bed. Oh, she can't be perused, she can't be seduced. She locked herself shut, gave the key to a cherub. It must take a sleuth, it must take the truth to get her to love like boys did Ruth. Xander was in swoon, never gave up too soon. To the gates of hell, to Europa, the Jupiter's moon. ministers danced, the Congress passed, the wars advanced, Xander later passed, but the love did last. Nikki and Jazz were the Trudeau task. Nikki had a girl, name was Rita Lou. Jazz had a girl, name was Sonia Diaz. Rita Lou was teaching at a school in Beijing. Came to see Nana home at the Seattle dwelling. They spoke of the word, the coveting thing. She left her the scuff, it was covered in shin. Then she heard of the curse, the COVID-19. The damn thing took Nana all alone. The damn thing took Nana all alone. In her dream, in her dream. And that was the tale of Nana Doline, a joyful machine, a saint and a queen. May her rest be serene, 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 may her rest be serene. Oh, Nana, 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 Nana Doline.
LaunchLeft aims to create an intentional space that highlights and empowers all artists for whom radical creativity is not a choice, but a necessity. LaunchLeft begins with music, but its ultimate aim is to launch left-of-center artists in all creative fields.